For over 30 years, Dos Winkel has traveled to the remotest corners of the globe to photograph exotic plants and animals in their natural surroundings. In the process, his spectacular images have earned him an international reputation. On this trip, it's Dos's skills underwater that earns him a place on a scientific expedition looking to explore the rivers of the remote cloud forests of central Peru. Stefan Austemüller and Nina Pardo, through their conservation organization Mundo Azul, organized this unique trip for a group of biologists and photographers. They're in for a treat, as these forests have for years remained out of bounds to outsiders, because they were being used as an active base for terrorist groups such as the Shunning Path.
We're heading to the remote upland rainforest region of Yanachaga, Shunning, situated almost in the center of this vast country. The goal of this expedition is to make a preliminary investigation of the fish life in the rivers of this rainforest.
But that is still some way off. The journey to their place of study will take 3 full bone-jarring days. First by road, then when the terrain makes that impossible, by water.
I am glad the car ride is over, but I understand by talking to our guides that the 2-day boat trip into the jungle will be just as bumpy. For the first time, we get an idea of the scale of this expedition. I count 21 people to help us carry all the equipment. We have hundreds of kilos with us. Apart from all the food and the photo equipment, we also had to bring all our dive gear, the tanks and the compressor.
Biologist Stefan Austemüller has been planning this trip for more than a year.
Rock the boat.
I am happy to find out that I am not the only photographer. Joining us are renowned wildlife photographers Tui de Roy and Mark Jones. Tui has lived and worked in the Galapagos Islands for many years, and she became world famous for her books featuring the Galapagos wildlife.
This is the one that we use most of the time.
We are heading upstream into the jungle. It's a strange idea that we are going uphill. With every rapid, we gain 1 or 2 meters in altitude.
The boatsmen are completely at home in these foaming waters and use great skill in steering the boats. The man in the front gives directions to the motorista in the rear, telling him where and how fast he should go.
For the 6th time today we leave the boats, taking the camera equipment with us so that the boatsmen can more easily negotiate the rapids. We had to stop here as I had spotted a cluster of orchids clinging to the rock wall.
It takes more than 3 days of travel into the depths of the jungle before you can find orchids like these in their natural setting.
Well, this is as far as we can get with the boats. And this pool under the waterfall looks like an ideal spot for our first dive.
The compressor fills the tanks with clean air, while the team gets on with their final preparations for the dive.
It feels strange to put on a wetsuit in these tropical temperatures. We need them as protection, and surprisingly, the water is cool as it comes from the high mountains. Hendrik, the main cameraman on this expedition, will be my buddy on the dives. We've worked for several years now on underwater shoots, and we make a good team. The water clarity is not ideal, but it's good enough to take some pictures. Parts of it have a strong current and others not. We see a whole range of fish. It's great to see that there are several species of fish here. For the scientific validity of the expedition, Stefan is not only investigating the number of species, but is also interested in the amount of fish per species. And therefore, Nina and Yuri are counting the fish. Some of these fish Stefan is able to identify, but others are probably new to science.
So how was it? Did you see something?
Nice.
Nice pictures?
I think so. Lots of macro shots. Of the fish is not so easy because they're very fast.
Very fast, very shy, no?
From here, the only way to get further into the rainforest is to continue on foot. Now, the 21 porters really come into their own. Everything needs to be carried. Teobaldo, our almost 70-year-old cook, leads the way with his pots and pans. The higher we get, the more the trees are covered with moss and other epiphytes.
The first time 38 years ago.
And although there are lots of beautiful plants and flowers, one thing that really strikes me about this rainforest is the lack of bird and other animal sounds.
Finally, at the end of a long day's trek, they find an ideal place to set up the base camp. But the best spot for the tents lies on the other side of the river.
Some of the porters make a small raft, and one by one we make the crossing.
Teobaldo the cook immediately builds a fire to get the evening meal going, while the porters set up the tents.
Next morning after breakfast, Mark and Tui were talking with our cook Teobaldo. He told them that, incredibly enough, he used to live here 38 years ago.
It's a fascinating story. He actually used to live where we were camped upriver. Really? Yeah.
38 years ago.
38 years.
A group of 600 colonists were sent into Yanachaga by the government just over 55 years ago. Here they found an amazing wealth of fish and wildlife, herds of peccary 500 strong, and large groups of deer. These they hunted to almost extinction. Having exhausted virtually all the natural resources, the colonists abandoned Yanachaga after just 15 years. Finally, the reason for the lack of birds and animal life was becoming clear.
Not much wildlife anymore.
Before Teobaldo could finish his story, we heard a commotion in the camp. One of the porters had been attacked by a deadly viper and narrowly missed being bitten. The snake made a strike of about a meter, but luckily the young man jumped back fast enough.
Así nomás.
It was coiled up right where they usually are, right at the edge of the water.
Yeah.
And as he walked by, he saw it and jumped at the same time as the snake.
Wow.
So, struck. And apparently they can strike as much as a meter, and he said it missed him by just this much. And
They tell us that if you don't get treatment within 1 hour, you're dead.
You've got an hour to think about it. Yeah.
Wow.
Where we are days away from the nearest hospital. This snake, that lives both on land and in the water, was found near the pool where we are diving every day. I have had encounters with many poisonous sea snakes, but I know that as long as you don't harass them, they're totally harmless. But I have no idea how this one would react in the water. It's nice to see him, but to be honest, I hope we don't see him again.
From base camp, Dos makes short forays into the surrounding forest. Finding himself seduced by the peace and quiet of this jungle pool, Dos waits silently for over 6 hours before seeing the first sign of life. It's a caiman, a successful member of the alligator family, who's found a way to outlive the dinosaurs. And small can also be beautiful. Finally, Stefan locates a suitable place for diving. And the hundreds of kilos of equipment carried in all this way can be put to good use.
For our purposes of determination, we would need pictures of the whole fish taken from the side so that we can have all the details of coloration, of the shape of the fins and the body.
Careful, for the snakes.
We are the first people to dive here. The visibility for a rainforest is just extraordinary, much better than further down the river. It's amazing to think that no one before us has ever looked at this river from this point of view. Under a tree stump, we find a very shy sort of catfish. As far as Stefan knows, this species has never been described. This fish has 2 pairs of eyes. The one of his tail will hopefully fool a predator. We've encountered a lot of interesting things here on this expedition, but for me, the highlight really is the diving. For me, the stars of the show are these diligent parents. They have an incredibly effective way of protecting their young. It sure is a mouthful.
The male and the female, two small fish, a little bit striped like zebras. And there were maybe 50, 60 tiny babies, this big, and the female, but also the male, they took them in their mouth, kept them for a while, and then they spit them out again.
Yeah.
It was an incredible situation.
Stefan and his colleague biologist Yuri Hooker catch samples of each species, which they take back to the lab for identification and further anatomical studies. After a week's hard work, the team finally begins the long journey out of this fragile, forgotten wilderness.
And I think we have incredible material about reproduction behavior, about colorations, about fish species. And I think we really have achieved a lot. And now it's time to go home and do the real work. Develop the pictures, write the proposals, raise the funds, and come back and do some more research.
Since 1986, Yanachaga has enjoyed the status of national park, which set it off on the long road to recovery. But the impact made by just 600 colonists is still being felt more than 50 years on. It may be more than a century before this unique highland cloud forest fully recovers from its traumatic past.